Oh hey, have you heard? We're almost at the end of the year, which means it's time for my annual countdown of my favourite games. And this year I am restricting it to just 10, which does hurt a little as it means the games like Thank Goodness You're Here, Cat Quest 3, Tales of Kenzera and Never all miss out on slots. But sadly that's just what happens with these sorts of things. Also, the Tomb Raider Remaster Collection is ineligible since the games originally released between 1996 and 1998, but rest assured that that collection is something I valued highly this year. Of course, if there's a game that I haven't mentioned in this video, there's a high likelihood I have not played it. I'm playing catch up on the Exa series, so Infinite Wealth isn't yet on my radar. I really want to play Echoes of Wisdom and Metaphor, and games like Fear the Spotlight I simply haven't gotten round to yet. So now I've covered all that, let's get this intro out of the way and just get straight to my top 10 favourite games of the year. PS1 style survival horror is having a great time right now, with the low poly aesthetic proving itself to be an effective tool in generating a surreal, unpleasant vibe. And so, here's Crow Country, a game that takes its gameplay from classic survival horror while swiping its aesthetics from Final Fantasy VII, all Playmobil proportions and chunky pre-rendered but not really environments. It's set in an abandoned amusement park where the themes of each section of the park are used to great effect to ramp up tension. A dinner party hosted by the whimsical King Mushroom contains actual poison mushrooms that will kill you. A haunted mansion attraction clashes with the actual creatures found inside. And a theatre is full of whatever these things are. Gameplay is exactly what you'd expect from old school horror. You find items, you use them in various places, you have to manage your ammo and health and hope that you don't get ravaged by a skeletal being in the process. It also has a great story focused on Mara Foster, a detective investigating the disappearance of the theme park's owner. Mara is the sassiest of horror protagonists, refusing to back down under any circumstances, although cracks do begin to appear in her sense of identity. There is a lot going on in this theme park too, and you'll never fully grasp what's happening here until the very end. Honestly, it's not quite the spookiest experience, but I did have an excellent time with Crow Country. And hey, the rides are easier to get on than in Disney World.
May your memories live on, forever.
One thing that's often been talked about this past year is nostalgia for the B-tier game, the genre that had a modest budget, often tripped over its own feet in many ways, but had that one specific element that made it a memorable cult classic despite everything. In my opinion, mourning the loss of this type of game feels premature in a year that gave us Stella Blade. This game was in a weird place this year, often adopted by a particular brand of loser who seemingly only cares about video games when there are tits involved as some kind of political message rallying against... Look, I don't know, I tune these people out because I have better things to do with my life, quite frankly. Meanwhile, I'd been following the development of Stella Blade because its mixture of distinct aesthetics, sexy lady, and flashy combat evoked Bayonetta and Nier Automata, so I was on board. And oh boy, is this game Nier Automata. Story-wise, Stella Blade really is a clumsy retelling of Yoko Taro's game, with confused messaging, glaring plot holes, and a localization I feel was handed out on the cheap if the strange word choices and bland acting are anything to go by. Except Eve. Her voice actress really is trying her best with what she has, bless her. And yet, I thoroughly enjoyed this game because, my god, the combat is really good. Imagine a game that sits somewhere neatly between Bayonetta and a Souls-like, and you'll find this. It has the difficulty, the bonfires, the methodical positioning of something from FromSoft, while Eve's moveset is also stylish and flashy. When combined with the absolutely rad monster designs, it ends up becoming a stylish romp that feels like you're kind of playing a cheesy B-movie and you just kind of go along for the ride. Also, the orbital elevator is one of my favourite gaming moments of the year. It's an extended sequence as Eve breaks into an old space centre, gradually ascends into the atmosphere through maintenance corridors and a luxurious viewing platform for the rich, invaded by a robotic monstrosity in a Japanese garden, and then finally she faces off against eldritch horrors at the top of the elevator. Absolutely stellar. Heh, stellar. At the start of the year, I finally got round to playing a mystery game that garnered a lot of critical acclaim, The Case of the Golden Idol. I love a good mystery game, and this is exactly the kind of mystery game that I want to see more of. If you're unaware of how it works, you're presented with a scene with maybe 1 or 2 static images. You find clues within that scene, and you have to organise a collection of words that you find into a description of what happened based on the limited information you have. I'm a big fan of Return of the Obra Dinn and The Root Trees Are Dead, and I'm always craving games exactly like them, and this scratched that itch perfectly. So imagine my joy when its sequel got a release date near the end of the year. Now set in the 1970s instead of the 1700s, The Rise of the Golden Idol builds a more cohesive story off the back of the events of the first game. Now, the titular Golden Idol is at the centre of a conflict between multiple groups with their own agendas, all stabbing each other in the back. I absolutely love this game. The mystery solving was changed quite considerably from the first game, as there were fewer murders and the cases were a lot more interconnected, but this gave the game a wider variety of cases to solve, rather than just always trying to figure out who did it and why with what. The interface was also drastically improved, allowing the designers to add new and interesting elements to uncover. Also, because everything was interconnected, you have to use your knowledge across cases to solve them, which adds a lot of welcome complexity. It might not look like much, but The Rise of the Golden Idol is an enthralling experience for anyone who loves piecing together clues and solving riddles.
Nothing to fear. The cunning hairs are here.
Last year I was won over by a Hoyo-verse game, and this year that happened again even harder. While Honkai Star Rail was a great time, Zenless Zone Zero is entirely up my alley in so many ways. It has the exact kind of rebellious urban aesthetic that I love in games like Splatoon and Jet Set Radio, while also featuring an incredibly fun combat system. And yes, it is also exceptionally horny. I also felt that the mission-based structure of this game worked much better for the daily check-in gacha concept that Hoyo's games are built around. The big expansive RPG that was Star Rail was excellent, but it kind of got overwhelming, while Zenless Zone Zero feels designed to be enjoyed in bite-sized chunks. I also absolutely loved the tone of the whole thing, as you play as a brother and sister duo operating a video store during a time where strange rifts are affecting reality. There's a strange clash of the cozy feel of the video store and surrounding shops, and the existential threat that the world appears to be facing, and I kinda dig it. We've carved our own rebellious little space in the apocalypse, and we're gonna keep on going, which is honestly kind of inspiring. The factions you deal with are also full of incredibly fun characters, from scrappy scavenger teams to biker gangs, and from horror-themed custodial staff to a construction crew full of bears. The animation also really sells this goofy tone they've got going too, which has faced some criticism for being possibly too over-animated, but I kind of enjoyed how weirdly exaggerated it all was. Zenless Zone Zero has been a persistent presence in my life since it released, and I'm very happy about that. Big booty cop and shark made for life, baby.
I'm here to save a prince.
There's a lot to be said about the current state of Ubisoft, a company that's apparently drained every bit of creativity and joy from their projects, assembling a generic slab of content that either chases the massive open world trend or the bloated live service trend. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown feels almost defiant as a result, the last bastion of creative energy hidden inside a corporate structure that's in the process of eating itself from within. The Lost Crown puts you in the shoes of Sargon, a member of an elite military force known as the Immortals, who has to head into the mysterious Mount Kaf to rescue the titular prince. But the mountain appears to be locked into a mysterious curse, where time makes no sense, creatures roam the lands, and the only way to progress deeper is to acquire the Feathers of Simog and absorb godly powers like teleportation and a double jump. That's right, The Lost Crown is a Metroidvania, and a damn good one at that. It's got some of the best movement in the genre since the Ori games, and the combat system has all the flair of the best character action games out there. This is a game that just feels extremely good to play. It's also a hefty challenge too, with more than a few moments where it frustrated me, while not once did I feel like stopping. The story is surprisingly good for a genre where I never expect to find a good story. It features themes of what it means to be strong, and features a load of time-bending nonsense that is right up my alley. The voice acting helps sell it too, with this cast being excellent across the board. So with this abundance of creativity, it was only natural that it failed to meet the expectations of its corporate masters, and the team who made it was dissolved, likely shuffled off to some Tom Clancy DLC or something. And if that's not emblematic of everything wrong with the games industry right now, then I don't know what is. So if the Rise of the Golden Idol didn't reveal how much of a sucker I am for deductive puzzle solving that makes my brain feel good, then perhaps I can introduce you to Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, the most horrifying video game for the kind of person that appreciates modern video game characters yelling every puzzle solution the second you walk into a room. Which is not me, I'd rather they didn't do that. And here's why. This is a game that is apologetically for the puzzle sickos like me, who want to feel confused and bamboozled until we finally crack the code and get that euphoric good vibes of feeling, at least briefly, incredibly clever. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is set in the 1960s, where a woman has been invited to a strange hotel in the middle of nowhere, where an oppressive Lynchian vibe hangs over everything. The place is weird, filled with riddles, and the residents are nowhere to be seen outside of surreal, fleeting glances. 3 years repeat themselves in all the puzzles. Mazes stack on top of mazes. Someone may have been murdered, but maybe they weren't. Who can really say? If all this sounds like pretentious nonsense, then yes, it absolutely is. And that's why I loved it so much. I'm still not entirely sure what Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is all about, but it plays like Resident Evil, where all the zombies are replaced by maths problems and memory tests, and I absolutely loved it. If you too are a horrible puzzle sicko, then you owe it to yourself to play Lorelei and the Laser Eyes.
You're trespassing, and I'd kindly like you to get the hell out of my zone.
Do you know what I hate? Roguelikes. They're repetitive, randomised to the point of absurdity, and completely uninspiring. I'm not sure if I hate them more or less than survival crafting games, which are equally repetitive, but now built around the mechanics of babysitting someone whose inability to retain water for more than 5 minutes suggests they should maybe see a doctor. Plus a gameplay loop that involves collecting an overabundance of crafting materials which you can then turn into other materials. It's absolute tedium to me. They're busy work of the video game, and should be stricken from this earth. I would absolutely never, ever put a roguelike survival game on my top games of the year. The notion of it is absurd. I will not stand for this slander. Anyway, here's Pacific Drive, a roguelike survival game. Shit. Yes, I am as surprised as you are. Not only is this here, but it's this high up. I blame it entirely on one thing. It appeals directly to my secret, only occasionally seen love, motor vehicles. Oh, also my more prominent love of weird shit, which should be obvious from looking at this top 10 in general. Pacific Drive is set in the Olympic Exclusion Zone, a cordoned off sector of the spookiest region of the United States, the Pacific Northwest. This is home to the effects of science gone horribly wrong, as reality is breaking apart, leading to anomalies such as bouncing balls of horrible energy, the ground that wants to punch you in the dick, and fucking Christ, these mannequin bastards, fuck! Your only protection against the horrors of the zone is a beaten up 1970s station wagon. I call her Polly Pontiac. She will never let me down. Sure, her doors might fall off and sometimes her tires explode, but she's always there for me. She will never hurt me. Unless I close the boot on my face, but that's entirely on me. Half this game is cruising around amid the horrors, gathering materials before you're devoured by said horrors, and then blasting your way through a screaming portal and hoping you still have a roof rack on the other side. The other half is extensive car maintenance. There is a tactile joy in ripping old rusty doors off Polly and giving her shiny new radiation-proof blast shields, grafting extra fuel and battery to her, and making her into the toughest bitch in town. I have no idea how to describe how good this all felt to play, and I have not stopped thinking about it since I reviewed it back in February. I gave it an 8. I should have given it a 9. Call me Roger Taylor, because I'm in love with my car. I have mostly always been a Tekken fan. Ever since Tekken 3, the fighting game that every PlayStation kid played, the series has been my fighting game of choice. Admittedly, that love hasn't been consistent, as I initially hadn't played every single game, but ever since Kazuya was added to Smash Bros, I jumped into Tekken 7 and properly learned how the game worked at last, and now I am officially a Tekken boy. Oh no. So of course, I had to pick up Tekken 8 when it released back in January, so now I can join all the other Tekken nerds from the get-go. Is my Gold Xiao Yu here though? Oh yeah, of course she is. Well, let's go then. There are two fundamental things that Namco has brought to Tekken 8. The first of these is the heat mechanics. There are hardcore Tekken heads who absolutely despise these mechanics, but the weird flashiness and bombast they bring has made the game feel fresh and exciting. Sure, it can be frustrating to get beaten down by someone with a mastery of these mechanics, but isn't that true of all fighting games? Let's be real. Tekken 8 is to me the best the Tekken series has ever felt to play. There's a fluidity to the cast that past games were lacking, and the emphasis on pushing forward discourages turtling, one of the more tedious things you'd encounter in 7. Tekken 8 was my most played game, according to my official PlayStation stats, where I played 230 hours, because it's just that much fun. It's the perfect game to chuck on if I want to have a blast with something for half an hour in between major tasks. But that's not all. Tekken 8 also has a big old story mode, and it's honestly the goofiest that Tekken has ever been too. It focuses on Jin training to take down his father Kazuya, who is reveling in the fact that he allegedly killed his own father, and now he wants to hold a tournament of strength where every loser gets their country destroyed. It features a scene where Jin drives a motorcycle up a building and culminates in a JRPG fight on an asteroid. It's anime nonsense of the highest order and I am here for it. Plus, my girl gets some story relevance and her dorky love of theme parks helps save the world. It's about goddamn time.
Cloud! Cloud!
Cloud!
Did you know that Final Fantasy VII is quite good? It's hard to believe, I know, but it's true. And in 2020, the much-awaited first part of its massive expansive remake released, baffling many with its multiversal nonsense where the story is different but ghosts of the past are desperately trying to keep it on track with the original. It left many people wondering exactly where Square Enix were planning to take the story going forward. The answer, we've learnt this year, is mostly the same trajectory as the original, only now Sephiroth shows up more often to pester his twink boyfriend at awkward moments. He wants Tifa out the way so bad, that messy bitch. That said, what Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has achieved is quite different to what Remake achieved. While the first part raised questions about the necessity of remakes and played around with the idea of fate and predetermination, the second part is mostly a more straightforward take on the source material, except everything is now grander in scope. Calm is now a thriving village of whimsy, the Chocobo farm has a fleshed out family we can help out, Junon has become the site of a complex class war, and the goofy dolphin minigame is now Wave Race 64 for some reason. Costa del Sol is the obligatory anime bikini episode, the Gold Saucer date now has actual smooches with the best girl, Gongaga has stuff in it now. Oh, and Queen's Blood is absolutely giving Triple Triad a run for its money, a feat previously thought impossible. The size and scope of Rebirth is overwhelming, to the point where I hear that Square Enix may now have money troubles. I'm honestly not surprised. Calm it down a bit, guys. The only reason this is second on my list and not first is because, dear God, did the final boss fight need to be a 5-hour marathon with the cheapest mechanics in the world? No, it did not. So it comes down to this. The final game of 2024. The game that won me over and left me feeling like, you know what? Video games are great, actually. Appropriately, it's a game built on the idea that video games are great, actually. So hey, Game of the Year. You got a name? God, I am about to sound like an absolute fanboy, but who cares? I already made a whole series on PlayStation history, I'm not hiding this now. I have, historically, always been quite fond of the PlayStation brand. Nintendo is cool and all, but the system that got me properly, obsessively, unabashedly in love with video games was the PlayStation 1. I'm not going to bore you with the Tomb Raider stories again, I know I've done that enough already. But it was the official UK PlayStation magazine and the world it showed me that made me fall in love with the medium. It helped that the PS1 was an absolute weirdo of a console. Sure, everyone talks about the Metal Gears and the Final Fantasies of the era, and all that's great, obviously, but for me, the thing that defines the system is how unafraid it was of just being goofy, weird fun. Stuff like Parappa and Devil Dice, the blending of music and video games, and stuff like Wipeout, and the sheer willingness to just throw whatever at the system just to see what stuck. It was a glorious experimental time, and it's no wonder that I got so hooked. Sony have historically pushed for this all throughout their consoles, and it's always made their games seem exciting to me. Don't get me wrong though, I'm not sitting here and defending everything they do. They have definitely screwed up at times, and honestly, the current generation is kind of proof of this, with a first party lineup that's painfully barren of the kind of whimsy that made me love PlayStation to begin with. Which is why Astrobot is such a revelation. It's the final remnants of what made PlayStation so fun. It's naked, unfiltered joy in video game form. It's a celebration of the history of the console and the games that made it what it was. However, it would be easy to write it off as masturbatory nonsense if the game all that celebration was attached to wasn't also one of the most superbly designed pure video game experiences out there right now. Despite all the PlayStation love on show, Astrobot is perhaps the most Nintendo that Sony have ever been. Team Asobi have made their own Super Mario Galaxy, and that is the highest praise that I can give it. Across 5 galaxies of assorted levels, this team has turned fun into an art form. Levels where you shrink to the size of a mouse and back again, revive singing trees, and stop time to use falling casino chips as platforms are all present. Plus an abundance of power-ups from an inflatable octopus to a long-armed monkey. But the joy also just comes from the small moments. It comes from exploring an area and finding the flowers swoosh satisfyingly as you pass. The inclusion of a basketball just so you can whack it into a net on a whim. The amount of places that'll just spawn coins in hard to reach places as tiny rewards for extra exploration. There's a sense that everything here exists to be a sandbox where play is king. Also, the DualSense is by far my favourite controller of all time, and the way Astrobot uses its functions is fantastic, particularly in how it utilises subtle vibrations. In a way though, Astrobot is also bittersweet, as the cavalcade of IPs you can collect can feel a bit like a graveyard when you realise how little attention Sony gives most of them today. Similarly, the inventive DualSense use makes you wonder why other games on the system, including the first-party games, don't do the same. Quite frankly, we need more of this, and fewer remasters of The Last of Us. Astrobot is my personal game of the year for 2024, and I legitimately cheered when it won Game of the Year at the Jeffies. And you know what? I'm going to make an announcement. To celebrate this even further, please keep an eye out on the channel for a full, comprehensive guide to who every single one of those special bots are. It'll be coming extremely soon, like January soon. I have been working on this thing in secret, and I've been having a lot of fun with it, and I can't wait for you to see this thing. It's going to be stupidly long, just so we're clear. If you want to see that, please subscribe and you'll get to see it when it releases. Or if you want to donate to my Patreon, you can get some of the first looks into some of the early sections that I've already posted to my patrons. The link to that is in the description. Thank you for watching my best games of 2024, and I hope you enjoyed the video. But enough about me. Please let me know your favourite games of 2024 down in the comments below, and I will see you very soon with the history of Astrobot. Goodbye.